Hello everyone, welcome to the video lecture series on Industry 4.0. So today we are going to discuss about a new topic which is known as resource-based view of a firm. This is basically part of the fourth unit for the course Industry 4.0. I am your course instructor, Mr. Prashanth N. So let us proceed. So before we begin, let us look into this word resource. What do you mean by resource? So if we see, resource is basically a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. So this is the basic definition of a resource. So any company or any firm which is operating will have its own resources. Let us say if it is a manufacturing company, so usually in production management we refer to resources in terms of 5M. So these are as follows, which you can see in this graph. So first resource is men. So these are nothing but the people who are involved in the production or the managing of the firm. Then you have materials. Materials, for instance, may be raw materials which is being under process, or any other materials which is involved in the company. Next you have money. Money, of course, is a major resource. And then you have machines. Machines are the equipments that are being used in the company. And finally you have method. So these are the 5 different resources which an industry or which a firm can basically make use of. Of course, these resources are not limited to only these, but broadly or in general, these are the 5 resources which are very widely acknowledged. Now, if we look into these resources in detail, we will see that these resources can be broadly again classified into two different ways. One is a tangible resource, the other one is an intangible resource. So what is tangible resource? Sorry for that. So what is tangible resource? Tangible resources are the resources which are physical in nature, right? Which can be touched or which can be felt. So what are these resources? For example, people, men, materials, money, machines. These are all physical resources which can be touched or which can be moved from one place to another place easily, or which can be felt. Then intangible resources are the resources which are not physical in nature, something which has to do with intellect or intellectual property rights or something like that. For example, if we talk about method, so what is a method? Method is the means of accomplishing something. So if we take skill as an example, skill is intangible resource, right? You cannot touch a skill, but you can make use of that skill for the effective performance or effective delivery of the task that is being assigned to you, right? So that is the broad classification of the resource in terms of tangibility and intangibility. This will help us further in understanding the topic, which is resource based view of a firm. So now that we have understood what is a resource, let us try to understand what is this resource based view of a firm. So to begin with, resource-based view of a firm, or resource-based view, is in short referred to as RBV. So before going into the definition, I would like to spend a few minutes on understanding the resources in detail, little bit more in detail. Let us say you have a company, right? A company has its own resources. These resources will obviously provide some intrinsic advantage or competitive advantage to that company, right? So to be specific, what are the different types? For example, let us say you have excellent leadership at your disposal. You have very good managers. Then you have people who are giving you a lot of innovative ideas, or engineers, or you have a very good research and development team. This is something to do with intellectual property rights, so you will have innovative ideas. Then your company may have its own brand value, right? So it may have its own reputation. Then you may be operating at a global scale. You may be operating in different countries, multinational companies. It is a multinational company, and this will give you obviously a lot of exposure and a lot of market opportunities. So that is another advantage you may have. Next, you may have team which work effectively. You have a bunch of engineer and managerial team which work effectively. This will give you basically the teamwork that is necessary. Then you may have processes which are well managed. And when we talk about process, basically we are integrating different processes and they need to be managed. And let us say, that itself will give you a lot of advantage. Then your company may be having strong financial positions, so you may be doing very well in the market. Your profits may be going up, the revenues may be going up. So your financial positions may be very good. And finally, you may be having partnership with leaders, or any other companies. You may be having collaborations with any other companies, which will give you access to their resources, etc. Right? So all these resources in general will basically provide a company its own advantage, right? So if you have this advantage, then it is easy for you to compete. So now let me look into the definition of resource-based view. So it is defined as follows. The resource-based view, or RBV, is a model that sees resources as key to superior firm performance. So what it basically tells is, resource-based view is an approach that one can take to obtain superior firm performance, or in other words, a company can leverage the resources, or they can take an advantage of the resources that they already have in their possession for superior performance in the market. So that is what basically the resource-based view of a firm is. So this is applicable provided if the resource exhibits VRIO attributes. So what is this VRIO attributes? I'll come to that in a moment. So if the resource exhibits VRIO attributes, the resource enables the firm to gain and sustain competitive advantage. So this is the key word, my friends, my dear students. Competitive advantage. Why we are doing all these things? In order to have competitive advantage in the market, so that this advantage needs to be sustained over a longer period of time, so that I can sustain in the market and I can basically position myself in the market. So that is basic idea of resource-based view. Now let us look into this in detail, a little bit more detail. So this RBV approach of achieving competitive advantage is not a new concept. So this emerged in 1980s and 1990s after the major works published by Mr. Warnerfeld B. So a lot of other people are also working on this particular area. You can see, you have people Prahlad and Hamel. They have their own ideas, the core competence of the corporation. Banerjee basically has a firm resource and sustained competitive advantage, and others. So all these peoples are proponents, or the people who basically support the idea of resource-based view. They have done a lot of work on this. So that is how this idea of resource-based view has evolved over a period of time. So now, if you look into the resource-based view, as I told you, it basically relies on the resources. So we have already classified the resources: tangible resources, intangible resources. So both are important. Both will be taken into considerations. So these two must be heterogeneous and immobile. So we make two assumptions here. The resources which are tangible and intangible must be heterogeneous and immobile. What is heterogeneous? Heterogeneous here implies that, let us say, if there are two different companies in the market, the resources what is there in one company is not the same as the resources that is there in the another company. So that basically means that the advantage of a company, or if a company has different resource, they will definitely have different competitive advantage. So that is basically what is mean by heterogeneous. The other one is immobile. The resource may be immobile, or the resources may not be mobile, or in other words, the resources may not be moved from one place to another place. We know tangible resources can be moved from one place to another place because they are mobile. They are basically physical systems. And intangible resources are the one which are immobile. An example, let us say the brand equity or the reputation of a company, right? You cannot move the reputation of a company from one company to another company, right? So that is an example for immobility of the resource. Now, provided all these things are there, and also there is VRIO resources, the VRIO attributes, which is also part of the firm or of the company, then this entire thing, right? Entire thing will ensure that you basically have competitive advantage. That is basically what is resource-based view. Now let us look into this VRIO as a resource. What are these VRIO resources? Now before doing that, I would like to take an example first. So let us take an example of a company, of two different companies. So, Apple, which is basically a US-based company, US-based MNC, and then you have a Samsung, which is a South Korean conglomerate company. So these two are the giants in consumer electronics market, right? As we all know. So what are the competitive advantage these two companies have? They both have their own market share. They both have their own loyal customers. Now, if you look into the Apple basically has a business strategy of focusing on design and user experience while outsourcing elements such as manufacturing, right? So basically the main focus of Apple is in terms of design of their products and the overall user experience, while the manufacturing is usually outsourced to a different place. Maybe they do have a lot of manufacturing factories set up in or outsourced in China, for example, right? Whereas Samsung doesn't follow the same business strategy. The strategy of the Samsung is entirely different. So the Samsung's business model basically focuses on vertical integration of supply chains and ramping up of production volumes. So here, if we see, Apple is more focused on the design and user experience, whereas Samsung is more focused on vertical integration of supply chains and ramping up of production volumes. So if we see a little bit more in detail, so Apple spends a lot of time in its target marketing, research, and product design. So as a result, Apple succeeds better than Samsung in design and integration, and it doesn't want to take any risk with respect to the design and integration of their products. That is what Apple does. Whereas Samsung, on the other hand, they also, of course, do focus on design, research, and all those things. But as I told, they are basically a conglomerate, and they operate at a whole new different, multiple different markets or multiple different domains. So just like their counterparts, such as Sony, which is present in different domains, the Samsung also is present in different markets. They emphasize on vertical integration, and they believe in flooding their products into the market, right? So, for example, Samsung is present in various different consumer electronic segments. For example, they do provide flat panels, sensors, LEDs, batteries, gaming systems, cameras, cell phones, tablets, smartphones, and medical electronics, lot of stuffs. In fact, Samsung do supply a lot of components to Apple, right? They do buy Apple do buy components from Samsung. If we look into the the profits, obviously Apple sells its product at much higher price, and as a result, it reaps a lot of higher profit margins. Whereas Samsung, on the other hand, uh, they do have their own products which are high-end products, but since they believe in flooding the products to the market, they do target the customers from the whole spectrum of customers, from the budget buyers to the luxury to the high-end products that they can cater to, right? So both these companies have their own competitive advantages, and they do have their own fights. For example, Apple and Samsung's obviously are involved in a lot of patent rights. They do have infringement, they do fight on patents. So they have fought earlier with the infringement of patents. So that is something which, that is the intangible resource that they basically focus on. And the both the companies are positioned well in terms of their own resources and how they can make use of them for sustaining themselves in the long term in the market. So next, let me move to the VRIO framework. Now, VRIO framework, as I told you, VRIO is an acronym. So what is it? So V stands for valuable, R is rare, I is imitation, O is organization or organized. Now, when we want to discuss about the competitive advantage, so the input to obtain a competitive advantage is that a company should have resources which are valuable in nature, right? So what is valuable? Valuable resources basically means that let us say the products which are coming out of this firm should be of higher value. Now, value is something which is which has reference to the cost. So if I'm getting a product, a superior product at a lower cost, then obviously the value of that particular product or the good will increase, right? So that is one thing. So the resource or the capability to produce the products, it should be valuable. And if the answer is yes, then we look into the rarity. So rare basically means the resources what the company possesses, it should be rare. So it should be something which is part of the company, which is not found in any other company, right? So if this is also true, then we look into the imitation part. Now, every technology can be copied, or it can be imitated, or it can be re-engineered, if it doesn't infringe upon the patent of a particular patent rights of a company. But the imitation aspect, if it is costly, then obviously the other companies would like to venture into it. So if you have a resource which are valuable, which are rare, and also it is costly to imitate, then that is something which is very much advantageous. So if the answer to this is also true or yes, then whether your organization is having the ability to capture the value or to capture the benefits of all these things, that is valuable, rarity, and imitation. So whether your organization is geared up to capture the value of all these inputs. So if the answer to all these things are yes, then obviously you will be enjoying a sustained competitive advantage in the market. Now, if the answer to all these things are no, then obviously you will not have the competitive advantage, and you will not have the competitive, there will be competitive parity, and your advantage may be temporary in nature, and that is how it is. Now, as an example, if you look into Google, now Google is one of a company, right? So it has resources which are valuable, which are rare, which are costly to imitate, and whether the Google is geared up or organized enough to exploit all these things, the answer is yes. And what is the result? The result is, it enjoys sustained competitive advantage. Finally, I'd like to discuss one more type of view, which is known as industrial organization view. This is a little bit contrary to the resource-based view. So if we see the competitive advantage, the factors which are influencing the competitive advantage of a company, then according to some statistics, so the firm effects, that is nothing but the resources which are internal to the company will have an effect of up to 30 to 45% in the competitive advantage of a company. That is internal resources, right? Exploiting internal factors or internal resources. This is resource based view, right? 30 to 45%. Similarly, what about the other remaining percent? So there is one more view which is known as industrial organization views, or IOV approach. This approach focuses on exploiting the external factors. So this will provide around 20% effects. So this roughly adds about, let us say, 50% of the entire effect that is there on the competitive advantage, and remaining effects, obviously remaining 50% or remaining 30 to 50, depends on the corporate parent, year effects, unexplained variance, and etc. Right? So if we look into this, what is the right approach to have a sustained competitive advantage? Obviously the answer is combination of both industry effects as well as firm effects. That is, in other words, combination of both resource based view as well as industrial organization views. So this will obviously will give you much better sustained competitive advantage. So that's about it. So thank you for watching.